Hello and welcome back to the second part of our second lesson, solving quadratic equations by factoring, in our fifth unit for our grade 10 academic math class. So we started out this lesson by looking over how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. We realized that once we have something that's factored, like we do here, we can take each of these factors and set them equal to 0, and then reorganize to solve, and those will give us values that will drive the entire equation to be equal to 0 also. All the ones we've seen today so far have had two solutions. I would say that that's fairly common when we're talking about factoring or solving equations by factoring. So let's start up with E again. So we have 6x squared plus x equals 12. So as before, we don't have all the terms on the same side, so that's what we're going to do first. We're going to transpose that over by subtracting 12 from both sides. That's going to give us 6x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. Alright, that's looking good. So this one, there's no common factors. This is going to be a tricky trinomial that we need to factor here. So again, we want to find the thing that's going to multiply to AC, which in this case is negative 72, and that adds to plus 1. So those values I think will be plus 9 and minus 8. So let's decompose this. So we have our 6x squared, there's plus 9x, minus 8x minus 12 equals 0. Let's common factor the first two. That's going to give us 3x followed by 2x plus 3. And common factor the second two. Again, we've got a leading negative term here, so I'm going to factor out a negative 4. And we'll be left with 2x plus 3 equals 0. To common factor one more time, 2x plus 3 is the greatest common factor, which leaves us with 3x minus 4 equal to 0. Okay, so that one's a little more involved in terms of the factoring, but now procedurally it's identical. We're going to set each of these equal to 0 and solve. Again, there's a little bit more work this time because there's going to be multiple steps to isolating x, but it's no big deal. Okay, so let's start by moving 3 to the other side of our equation. That's going to give us 2x is equal to negative 3. And then dividing both sides by 2, x is equal to negative 3 halves. Over here, we're going to start by transposing 4 to the other side by adding 4 to both sides. Dividing both sides by 3 gives us 4 thirds. So these are fractions, positive or negative fractions. Is that okay? Yep, no problem at all. Just a little more involved in terms of the factoring, but once we are at a factored place, we do the same thing. We set each of our factors equal to 0, and then we isolate x. And that's that. So one other type of factoring that we're going to look at here, we have 4x squared minus 16. So they're all on the same side, so that's a good place to start. We're now looking for factors we can do. I'm going to common factor out 4. And that's going to leave us with x squared minus 4 equals 0. So inside the bracket I have a difference of squares, which is nice. So remembering that difference of squares, when we factor them, we take the square root of the first term, square root of the second term, one gets a plus, one gets a minus. So there we have our factors. Now we're going to just move along and set each of them equal to 0. So we have x plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Little transposing gets us x equal to negative 2 and x equals 2. So that is, we've really seen all the types of factoring now. If we sort of look back at our lesson in its entirety, we see that we started out here with just some common factoring in B, a simple trinomial in C, a simple trinomial that has a common factor, that was D, E was a tricky trinomial, and F was a difference of squares. So that's kind of all of them. The only little variation we're going to look at here is this last part that says determine all values of x that satisfy the equation y equals 2x squared plus 5x minus 8 when y is equal to 4. So this is sort of just a little fancy way of saying, hey, we've got a new equation here, and in the place of the y, we're going to put a 4. And then we're going to go about solving it. So that's what we started with. 4 equals 2x squared plus 5x minus 8. Now, not all the terms are on the same side. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to address. We're going to transpose this by subtracting 4 from both sides. So we're going to have 0 equals 2x squared plus 5x minus 12. No common factors here, so this is a tricky trinomial. We're looking to find the thing that multiplies to AC, which is negative 24, and the thing that adds to our b value, which is plus 5. Looks like those values are going to be plus 8 and minus 3. So let's decompose our middle term. So there's our 2x squared. We had a plus 8x minus 3x and minus 12. And now we go about factoring by grouping. We have, in our first two terms, we have 2x as our greatest common factor, leaving us with x plus 4. And in our second, again, there's a negative leading term here, so I'm going to factor out the negative 3, leaving me with x plus 4. One more round of common factoring, gives us 2x minus 3 and x plus 4. So there we have it, it's factored. Now, be careful, questions like this that ask you to do a little more work in the rearranging and factoring stage, this is not over yet. We need to go about solving this. So I'm going to do a little cheat here. I'm going to just copy this little section. I'm going to move it. You guys aren't so lucky on good old pen and paper, but you'll be all right. So there we paste it, there it is. So now we're going to go about setting each of these factors equal to 0. So here's our first one. We have 2x minus 3 equals 0, and our second, x plus 4 equals 0. First one, we transpose negative 3 over to the other side by adding 3 to both sides, and then we divide both sides by 2. X then will equal 3 halves. Second one's a little more straightforward. Transpose plus 4 to the other side by subtracting 4 from both sides, and there are our two solutions. So what I like about this lesson is it's a nice sort of callback to factoring, which was our Unit 3. Again, we've done the videos for Unit 3, so go and look at that stuff if you're a little bit forgetful in how to go about especially like tricky trinomial factoring or differences of squares. I think common factoring and simple trinomials kind of come back a little more easily. This might require a little bit of relearning. But nonetheless, this is the end of the lesson. Your homework is listed there at the bottom. Again, drop me an email if you have any questions in your homework. Otherwise, good luck, and we'll see you in lesson number 3.